Welcome to a grand conversation with Grandpa Diesel and Grandson Raphael, tackling current topics from a grandpa's point of view and from a grandson's point of view. Welcome. Hi, I'm Grandpa Diesel.
And I'm Grandson Raphael.
Hi, Grandson Raphael. How's it going?
Pretty good.
Raph, what in the world? There are two other people here.
Two new guests. The first guest on that whole show.
Ever. Yeah, this is our fourth podcast, Raph, and we have two guests.
Mm-hmm.
So, who are these guys, Raph?
Well, both of them are my good friends. One of them, Thomas, and the other, Mitch. And they're here to talk about distributism today.
Distributism. Ooh, okay, it's an ism. So, Thomas, tell us about yourself. How was your day? What's going on?
It's pretty good. I had soccer right before this, so I might smell bad, but
okay, that's
it's okay.
Right.
Yeah,
good.
Okay.
Mitch.
My day was pretty good. I just kind of had school afterwards. I was supposed to be at soccer, but I couldn't make it.
Okay.
So that's funny.
So yes, Raph let the cat out of the bag. We are going to talk about an ism, not capitalism, not socialism, which seem to be current topics of the day, but we're going to talk about something called distributism. And Mitch is our local expert here at the table, so we're going to send it over to him to start us off.
Yes.
So just tell us, Mitch, like a little bit, like I guess the definition of distributism. I mean, I've read up on it. Personally, I think it's a great idea.
Yes.
In general, it seems like it brings things to a more local level. So I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah. So distributism is something that among a lot of Catholic groups is starting to gain more and more popularity. Like what you said yourself. I kind of define distributism as this. Distributism is an economic philosophy that mainly promotes a widespread private ownership of production and financial equity. This counters the traditional ideas that we have of capitalism, where ownership is concentrated to the top, like the top % of people, like corporations and things like that. But it also challenges socialism by putting in private ownership into this equation. So in a way, it's kind of like a third way, or a third option is what a lot of Catholic social reforms put it. So it was originally based on the Catholic social teaching written by Pope Leo XIII, such as his encyclical Rerum Novarum.
So Rerum Novarum, I think, Ralph, we kind of went to a little class. We didn't hit them all, right? When was that written? Around when? Was it the Industrial Revolution?
Yeah, I think it was around the Industrial Revolution, so probably like during the 1800s at some point. Because there's a lot of new social issues that really needed to be addressed, which gave rise to it.
Yeah, and I think Pope Leo was concerned that the dignity of each individual was going to be lost with all the machines and industrialism, and that the person's individual rights were going to be trodden on.
Yeah.
It's something you can look at right now a lot when you're looking at the current AI revolution, but even also when you're looking at the way our industries and the dignity of certain industries are being taken over by this top % of people. It's something you can look on that heavily reflects our times today, which you can tell like a lot of apologists felt the same as Pope Leo about dignity, and they especially felt that it was being threatened by things like socialism and capitalism. Certain Catholic apologists promoted it and created it, such as G.K. Chesterton, Hilaire Belloc, and Dorothy Day, the servant of God, a servant of God. So those are a few apologists that mainly promote them.
Okay, so how would you describe distributism? Like getting down to specifics, what would it look like?
Like on a functional level?
Yeah, on a functional level.
Okay, so distributism would mainly look like this, where once someone reaches a certain age where they can be dependent off of their family, the government provides that person with a base amount of resources and a base amount of goods, such as land, and a base amount of food and things like that. And then also, like, especially land, but then also, like, an education on taking care of that land. and education of building that land up. This is kind of in a way like a popular phrase you've heard of, like why give a man fish when you can teach him how to fish. Mm-hmm. This provides people to be like mostly independent of themselves rather than being dependent off things like the government, which is what socialism provides, but then also dependent on things like corporations.
I would say like
does.
You depend on the government more in communism because that's where you're getting all your stuff.
Oh, that communism and socialism both offer that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
so how is this different than that? Because you just mentioned when you started about that the government provides you with land in a certain minimum. So how does that? Some people say, well, that's socialism.
Well, the difference is that with distributism, you have, like I mentioned with my definition, you have private ownership put into the equation, right? In a way, distributism is a mix between capitalism and socialism because you do have the government providing people with certain industries and certain resources such as education, such as even Medicare and healthcare and things like that, which most distributists would agree on. But it also has things like private ownership, like it's not like the government owns the people's land that it gives them. These people own it themselves, and these people can do what they want on the land. Right. And so would it decrease the amount of people working for like a big corporation, big companies, and they would be basically trying to provide for themselves based on how, whatever trade they have or whatever they have learned? Yeah, that's pretty much the main idea at its fundamental, to allow people to be as independent of themselves as much as possible and allow for local communities to be dependent on themselves. It's heavily based on the idea of subsidiarity, which you can find a lot of information on the capitalism in the Catechism. Right, can you explain that a little bit? Yeah, subsidiarity is the principle that, in short terms, it's the principle that the higher up the bigger the government is, the less power it should have, and then the smaller it is, the more power and more dependency that it should have, and that at its core, the base like form of society and the base form of government in the state, in the sense, is actually the family. Distributism is interesting because it's an economic system that rather than focusing like solely on this big government and focusing solely on that, its main focus is the base form of government, which is the family, and they wanted to create an economic system that would provide the most for the family and provide like an independence for the family, and ensures that the government isn't regulating the family and regulating certain things. Right. So yeah, I love that idea, because to me, like our founding fathers never thought of the government the way it is now, just in our lives, in our faces, it drives me crazy even that people don't understand, like all we talk about are these national politics, but really we should be just concerned about our local situation, our families, like you said, provide. And that's what I like about this idea about distributism. I kind of envision, like, the government has little or no influence at all on what is happening at the local level, but the local people are deciding for themselves. Is that? Yeah, exactly. Right? And what you mentioned with the founding fathers is key to my personal philosophy with distributism, like the Blue Ox philosophy. Okay, right? What is that? Let's hear it. So, yeah. I believe that a lot of the systems we have in place, like you mentioned, are things that are contrary to what the founding fathers fought for. The founding fathers, at its core, and what I think the revolution was based on at its core, is the stripping away of authoritarian forms of government and the creation of more democratic forms of government, right? When you're looking at our current system, especially that of capitalism in the U.S., we kind of have there's kind of like a new form of authority in our economy where these corporations and things like that are in a way an authority over the financial state of things, right? If you want to buy I don't know, potato chips or something, you usually are going to get them from Frito-Lay. They're like the ultimate authority over these things. If Frito-Lay releases a new flavor and it gets popular enough, other companies, smaller companies, are pressured into creating that new flavor, and into due to like the trends that set by and the trends and principles set by that corporation, they're pressured into following that. In a way, these corporations are a new form of authority, which is, like I mentioned before, completely contrary to what our founding fathers fought for.
Yeah. I mean, if you think about it, like, the founding fathers must have never taken into account how massive these industries were going to get.
Exactly.
I mean, think about it. You find Pepsi Cola or Coca-Cola everywhere. Everywhere you go, you see McDonald's, you see whatever. So I think that the great thing I love about distributism is it, one, adds more variety to the table. There's a lot more options when you have a lot of different companies working, because that way they have their own ideas, and they're not very as networked as you would see in a big economy like through capitalism. And I think that the most important thing to remember through distributism is just like, I like the value of the family, in which one can grow not just closer to your family, but the families getting closer to other families, which then work together. And I think it's really cool to see that at play.
Exactly, yeah. That even ties into, like I mentioned before, distributism at its core is a Christian ideology. It was founded based on Christianity. There's even Micah 4:4 from the Bible even states, "But they shall sit every man under his vine and under his fig tree, and none shall make them afraid, for the mouth of the Lord has spoken." This, in my opinion, kind of highlights one of the key principles of my philosophy of distributism, like the economic philosophy of distributism, because it highlights how distributism focuses on independence, and focuses on like the independence on a personal level of every man. Every man shall have his own vine, have his own fig tree, and he won't have like other pressures that will affect his dependence and his dependence in his life, like within this fig tree and within this land. In a way, the fig tree is just our in a way, the fig tree is kind of like a way to view our society, and how on a local level every man deserves a society, and every man deserves the right to be every society deserves the right to be independent and not have to be conformed by ideals created by bigger authorities and whatnot.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, something I think is very interesting to me about distributism is how it sort of takes different aspects from various ideologies. Like you said earlier, it's is a mixture of capitalism and socialism, but it's like taking various different good aspects of these ideologies, and like you also said, with like the principle of subsidiarity and like very locally based, which almost has like libertarian values, but also you mentioned like Medicare and certain things that the government does provide, which would probably ensure that the people on the local level could flourish to the best of their ability while maintaining their independence. It's like takes from all across the political spectrum to almost form this amalgamation into a very what I think is a quite good ideology, in my opinion.
Yeah. And my critique with like especially capitalism and communism is whenever these big politicians are talking, they are very talking on such a big scale. But like the truth is, the civilian, that every single person has their own story, and every person has their own situation they're in. So I think that the best thing that distributism does is takes that scenario and is able to focus on what's going on in the present where you are. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I think that voting for like a big like having, let's say, voting in for a president is very important, I think. But at the end of the day, like, you don't see too much change happening on your local level. So I think that it's so important to vote locally. And I think it's a good way to support distributism, is to do that. That way we can make the most changes and make the ways the most efficient in the scenario you're in. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you mentioned something, you mentioned something that's very important, which is the fact that, the fact that distributism focuses on the individual rather than like a larger society, right? Like capitalism and communism, part of my definition for them is that they're kind of like the people's ideology or the people's economics, where focus is on the populace and society as a whole. Distributism, what I like about it is it's the person's ideology. It focuses on the individual and focuses on the dignity of the individual, as opposed to like a utilitarian sense of economics. And Raphael also mentioned something very important as well, which is the fact that distributism in a way is kind of a toolbox of ideologies, right? Because you can mix a bunch of different like qualities of certain philosophies and ideology, and they can still match with the distributism. For example, with my like personal like idea of distributism, I have like a Georgist view on taxes, where I have like a land value tax, right? And that's still like distributist as a whole. There's even like monarchical and anarchical distributists, which even though I don't personally agree with these people, it still is it still like does at its core match distributism. Mm-hmm. So in a way, distributism is like a canvas for other ideologies, which is a very good thing for any sort of economic or philosophical system.
Mm-hmm. So I'm just trying to think of how would that look like if our small town here had was following the distributive way of life. Mm-hmm. What exactly, like, so sometimes I think of distributism as it would work good for landowners when they're farming the land and growing crops and having cattle and things like that, and they're all supplying each other's needs. But how could that possibly look at, or where would you even start in a small town like where we are?
You mind me explaining this?
Yeah, you can explain this.
So like,
take it away, Thomas.
For Steubenville, I'd say like, obviously the problem with distributism, which a lot of people bring up, is not everyone might not be able to grow certain crops, or not everyone's gonna be able to have their own well or whatever. So I think it's on the duty. This is why it builds so much community, is because people are gonna have to like share almost. Like people, like the person who can grow a lot of apples is going to have to be the one selling the apples where people can buy it from. Like, you're not going to be able to grow everything on your own land. Mm-hmm. So I think it builds, it builds the family up, but also builds the community up. And really, the community, I think, flourishes the most in this distributist setting, because, let's say, big family, like, are you talking about the Steubenville area?
Yeah, we could, yeah.
Yeah, like then maybe the
we never revealed our town, but Thomas, you let the cat out of the bag.
Oh,
that's
true. Shoot.
That is true.
That's okay.
Jefferson County.
No.
Yeah.
Yes, we are in Stephenville, Ohio.
Yeah.
You're fine.
I was gonna say, like, big families like that we know of, like the Nelsons especially. They do a lot of stuff already, but like they be the ones making the coffee, I guess. Like, I don't know. It's like it's very. There'd be a lot more small businesses in distributism, where I think small businesses are the best because one, you don't see a lot of corruption in small businesses because they're just kind of trying to get by almost. But also, I think having it more, like, if everyone stopped buying Coca-Cola, then the people in the area who are selling like their own cola or soda would make a lot more money. Yeah. So like, and there'd be a lot more small businesses, and I think that that'd be a better way of spreading out the money. That way, everyone can have some money. Right. As long as if you want to put your work in. Yeah. Like someone who doesn't want to do work is not going to do well in this. Yeah. So I think it's also built discipline as well for the person, which I think goes back into the value of the person and like building that up. But I would say in a small area, it is like if someone owned a river, they would be the one making the water and everything, cleaning the water. There'd be someone with a cattle who would be making the steaks, and there'd be someone then they'd be sold to the person who would cook the steaks and so on.
Very good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very like that. So I'm also thinking, Raph, back to our first podcast, AI.
Yeah.
And I think we mentioned how people are just going to be caught up in this AI thing, and AI is going to be like their friend, and and the social network, and the real possibility of the social network not happening as far as human contact. But what I like about distributism, I feel like we've mentioned community at least a couple of times, I think, and it's just how there's going to be human interaction.
Yeah.
Like and I think I was reading in one place that, we have all these issues in our country today, mental health issues, drug problems, all these things. And I think one of the roots is just the lack of human contact, lack of relationship, lack of community. And so with distributism, you're all kind of in this together. Does that sound kind of right?
And when you look at the public's view of distributism or the public's view of economics, like you mentioned it perfectly, how a lot of these problems, such as the mental health crisis, stuff like that, are caused by a lack of like contact with other people, and a lack of social life. And the root of the problem is something is like our current economic stance, our current economic system, because we're not, due to us relying on corporations for our means, we aren't. There's not as much of a need to go towards your local area and to talk to like the local business and whatnot in your area, right? You can just like go to a Walmart, right? The problem though with doing that is that these Walmarts and these corporations, they don't really have soul, right? They're trying to appeal to the mass amount of people as possible rather than trying to appeal to a single community. So this can like degrade the mental health of that community that doesn't feel pleased, if that makes sense. So going back to what I was saying, since capitalism and socialism have become such popular systems globally, the public doesn't really view capitalism as the root of the problem. So they don't really ever think of like a solution that would cut away capitalism. I feel like distributism offers that solution where if it gets popular enough among certain circles and among the larger people will start to view capitalism more and more as a problem, and will try to prevent the creation of these corporations and whatnot.
I mean, if you think about it, we've been in this system of capitalism for so long. But if there's a problem, people are like, that's just the way it is.
Exactly.
That's their mindset. It's just that's the way it is. They don't think of a problem. They think that this is just the way it is, which is that's a horrible mindset to have.
That's right, yeah.
So I think that there's a lot of problems. There's a lot of problems in this world. I think distributism would be a really good solution for so many of these problems because of, you're talking about that mental health crisis. I think that's so important. Like, the suicide rate has been higher than it's ever been before. But in distributism, is that true?
I don't know exactly, but
I'm pretty sure it is.
It is very high.
It's very, very high. So I think that this would, cause so much more community that people wouldn't, not necessarily, they would be forced to come together because this isn't fun. If there's someone that doesn't want to help out, then they're not going to get help themselves, Exactly. People have to interact with each other. People have to depend on each other, and it builds a lot more trust that we have today where people can't even go on the streets without being scared sometimes, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's very community-based, human-based ideology, I feel like.
Yeah, exactly.
And us Catholics have so much value in the person, the being of the person. I think that that's why we oppose utilitarianism so greatly, is because we think that a soul is infinitely important. So we can't like disregard the importance of these people. Like, we can't be like, this is the best thing for the numbers, but what about the 1% that's getting horribly harmed? You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Like, we're just taking advantage of people, and that's not okay.
That's the problem, in my opinion. One of the biggest problems with capitalism and socialism is the fact that at its core, they're both utilitarian. At its core, they both evolved to become utilitarian ideologies. With capitalism, for example, the corporations, rather than focusing on the dignity of their single employees, they focus more on the profit of the shareholders, but oftentimes the profit of the shareholders can oftentimes contradict the profit of the human soul and the profit of their employees. Capitalism is a system that at its core has begun valuing the almost like the Leviathan and the pleasing of the Leviathan, these corporations, more than the dignity of the human soul. With socialism, it's kind of easy to figure out how they have become utilitarian, how socialism has become utilitarian, right?
Explain the utilitarian just in case.
But just so people will know,
Utilitarianism.
Utilitarianism is the philosophical, like, moral belief that what is morally good is what is what provides the most amount of what provides good to the most amount of people.
Yeah, it's basically like you would do something for the greater good, even if it harms
someone else.
I have a good example for this. It's like, let's say there's 10 people, and each person is having organ failure for a different organ, but there's one healthy person.
Mm-hmm.
So you kill that person, harvest their organs, and hand out the organs to save all 10 people.
That's
The utilitarian belief is that you would have to kill that person to save the most people. I mean, I can see where they're coming from. They're trying to help the most people, but it doesn't matter what they do to achieve that. It's still like there's sacrifices that have to be made.
And in a way, our economics have become that.
Yeah, for sure.
Become much more utilitarian.
It's how can I make the most money? It doesn't matter how much, like, how can I make the most profit, even if it harms some people?
Yeah.
The incentive of capitalism is profit and only profit,
Yeah.
without any regard for the actual people it may harm.
Well, with socialism, I'd argue it kind of it sacrifices in a way it harms human dignity by sacrificing important things to human dignity, such as individuality and moreover private property, because private property at its core is something that is an expression for the person, right? The person creates something, so naturally they want to sell it and show it off to other people, which they're in the right to do so. Socialism, I'd argue, is a system that sacrifices that, and therefore sacrifices human dignity, or an important quality of human dignity.
Yeah, which I think that we've seen that such a big mark of that today, as you can see, especially with like what RFK is trying to change and such like that, where it's how much bad stuff is in our food that these companies are making just to make the most money. They're making food addictive on purpose, so we keep buying it.
Exactly.
Like the especially the dyes we have and stuff, that would never happen in a distributism economic system, because one, they have to make quality items because people aren't going to buy it if they aren't quality, since they know the people that make it.
There you go. I was just thinking of that. Yeah, like Joe's putting out a bad product, and and Sam and Mary and Sue, they're all going to come over. Joe, what are you doing?
You can't do anything if like the CEO of Frito-Lay's or something puts like red 40 in his Cheetos. You can't do anything because that's the only place where you can buy Cheetos.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that's like a really, really great thing.
Go generic.
To be fair, though, there's still so much things when you figure out distributism.
Sure.
There's
true.
It's still for sure being figured out. I mean, I feel like it's definitely in its evolutionary stage here.
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, I was gonna bring this up. One of the biggest flaws, in my opinion, with distributism is how unfleshed out it is. Right? Like, if you're looking at G.K. Chesterton and looking at Hilaire Belloc, who were the main economists, you could say, behind distributism, they didn't really exactly focus on the mechanics of it. They mainly focused on the philosophy of it and justifying its philosophy, because they themselves weren't economists. They weren't professional economists. So I argue it's the job of like neo-distributors who are like genuinely passionate about this. Like, I believe I'm passionate about it, to actually like study up on economy and study how this would actually work out from a practical lens.
To make it practical, I had this thought of, say you had 4 families and they were in an area and they like supported each other totally. One grew, one had cattle, like you said, and then 2 other families had, and then 2 other families. I could see it starting small and then growing, rather than trying to convert a whole small town into the distributism philosophy. It would almost be like starting somewhere else on the outskirts of town. Hey, we're gonna live by the distributism way of life, and here's how we're gonna do it. And then you kind of start out small. And grow.
It'd be very hard to implement fast. You definitely need to ease into it.
Yeah.
Right. All right, so as we wind up here, what are some, and as all of our podcasts, we just kind of touch on surfaces of topics and maybe things that you haven't heard of, like cryptids. So what kind of resources would you guys suggest, like if people wanted to learn more about distributism? And
I can touch on that. So for one, if you want to learn about distributism, you have to go to its core, what it's like solely based on, which is Catholic social teaching at its core. So I recommend recommend reading up on the sections of things like the Catechism and whatnot that talk about Catholic social teaching and talk about the importance of human dignity. I'd also recommend reading some of the encyclicals by Pope Leo the 13th.
Right.
Yeah, that's.
Wait,
one
how
of
do
my
you spell that for everybody? Is it?
I think it's RERUMNOVARUM. Is that?
Yeah, I
sound
think
correct?
that's it. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, I'm
Chat, clip
yeah.
that.
Yeah. So if you just do look at that, and there's some really good things on the dignity of the worker during the industrial age, and I think, in fact, that's. We with AI, it's kind of like the Industrial Revolution, but it's with AI.
Yeah.
So, and we, like I said, if you go back to our first podcast, you can hear some of that.
Yeah. In fact, another resource that I recommend, which is on the table right now, actually, is The Servile State by Hilaire Belloc. This book, I mainly get most of my critiques of capitalism and socialism from. And some of the topics I brought up in this podcast are more fleshed out. In this book, so I'd highly recommend reading that. I'd also recommend reading one of the first ones I read on distributism, probably the first one actually, was G.K. Chesterton's Outline of Sanity. Basically, this is just like a whole like thesis describing distributism and describing how it's a solution of the problems of socialism and capitalism. For a more modern one, I haven't read much of this, but Small is Beautiful, Economics as if People Mattered by E.F. Schumacher. That's also a very good one. I haven't read much of it, but
it's not exactly distributist as far as I understand, but it's in a similar vein of more community-oriented, smaller, like subsidiary kind of.
Exactly.
Okay. Got some values in there.
Very good.
Yeah.
Any last thoughts?
Well, I was just gonna say, like, it's our duty as human beings to, like, preserve the humanity in people, and we can't forget that. I think that with the path that a lot of our countries are going in today is going down a dark path of exponentially getting worse and worse, making up more and more excuses for things. So I think that it's going to need a drastic turn, because from the place we're going now, it doesn't look good. So it looks like a dark place, and I think that we need to save the humanity in each person, and we can't forget how much a soul matters, how much a person matters, because every person has their own story.
We need a revelation in our society of the way things are going, and then also like a solution to fix the way things are going. And I hope people like myself, people like Raphael, people like Diesel, and people like Tommy can help provide that solution and help provide people with that revelation. Because a lot of the problems, Tommy touched on this, but a lot of the problems in our society we often ignore because we assume that's just the way things are. But I think a lot of our problems shouldn't be the way things are, and that there's actually a lot of solutions if you look towards things for these problems, and we should focus on solutions to those things.
Yeah.
Okay, and so I just want to make a comment as the grandpa that for juniors in high school, you guys are phenomenal. So
Thank you.
So our country is in good hands if you guys, when we pass it on.
Just Academy.
Yeah.
So well, thanks for joining us. I was kind of thinking we need to have you guys back. Maybe a topic could be how the music that I grew up with in the 60s and 70s is so much better than the music today. What do you think? What do you think? Oh.
I don't know about that.
More of an 80s, 90s guy.
Okay, all right. Maybe some other topic then, but we'll see. All right, well, thanks for coming, guys.
Yeah.
Thank you for having us. We really appreciate this.
This was awesome.
Before we completely end, as mentioned in the last podcast, how did I get the name Diesel? Well, when my son was in high school, he and his friends, for some reason, started to call me Diesel. And so when my grandson, our first, Raphael, was born, my daughter, Rebecca, decided that would be a good name for Raph to call me instead of Grandpa or Pap or whatever. So Diesel it was, and it remains through our 13 grandchildren. And don't forget, God loves you.